Hey, it's me again. That was a weird, and the entries are just going to be weird. So, Dr. Lori O'Malley here again to talk about chapter 14 this time. So, this last module is my module that I created for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. Although there are, gosh, if you're interested in psychology, you really need to dive deeper into some of these classes that we have. Anyway, so chapter 14 is about abnormal psychology. And I got to tell you, people think of the word psychopath or psychopathy is how I say that word. Anyway, we think of these serial killers or, what out of movies like, or real life, like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy, or we think of things like the movie Split with the guy that had dissociative identity disorder. And then, they're all just different people in his head. And then they're waiting for the monster to come, and then the monster comes, or whoever, the beast, I think it was the beast. And then the beast comes and is like superhuman strength, all this. So that's not really how any of that stuff works. And when you hear the word psychopath or psychopathy, really you got to divide that word in half to get to the root. And psyche means the mind, so we're there, that's what we're talking about. But the pathy part or the opathy part really just means there's something wrong. So that word just means there's something wrong with the mind. It's not a diagnosis in the DSM, but it is something that Hollywood and social media and TV and the news media, they like to throw that word around as if it were a diagnosis. It is not and has not ever been a diagnosis in the DSM. Um, so the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorders, right? It's put together by the American Psychiatric Association. It is a giant book that is full of labels, diagnoses that you can put on people, and they're put into different areas that fit together, like anxiety disorders, like mood disorders. They call them mood disorders. Depression is in there, but also bipolar is in there because it talks about mood. Um, and how it ranges from depression to mania, the big shifts between those two. And then there's a category for personality disorders and all, so they're in categories like that. Um, and in that book is really what you would use to check the criteria for one label out of them, and then to see if a person meets the different criteria. There are like 6 or more things that you have to meet in that. And if you do, then you have this label. And if you don't, then you don't. But what's good about the DSM is that if you don't meet the criteria for one, it will suggest something else that you can go and say, oh, well, they do meet the criteria for this one. But the important thing about diagnosing people is that you use the least stigmatizing label. Mental health issues in our society are still very stigmatizing. And I'm not saying like going to a counselor. Most people understand going to a counselor because everybody has life issues sometimes when they need help from somebody else. And instead of using a friend who's in your life, and you may not want to tell all your secrets in your life or your feelings to, or they might be part of what you want to talk about, you go to somebody that you don't really know that's a professional, and that's counseling. But psychological disorders are very different. They have, first of all, they're drastically disruptive for a person's life. So if you have a psychological disorder that's labeled in the DSM, that means that your life is so interrupted that you're having problems with work, you're having problems with relating to your family members. You've got a lot of things that are causing you problems, that your life is basically being impaired by this disorder. So we want to, if we have to label people, we want to go with the least stigmatizing. Like something like depression. I mean, I think generally the population understands what depression is and knows that sometimes people can be depressed and then they cannot be depressed. Anxiety is the same. Lots of people feel anxiety, although really what they're feeling is stress, but that's another story. Lots of people feel anxiety, have anxiety, and then they move past it. So, you might need counseling while you're in the midst of it, But maybe then when you're able to handle life on your own, then you don't need counseling, right? So there's an ebb and flow, and like the things that we think of that are fairly common, like depression and anxiety, those are not very stigmatizing because everybody can kind of relate to that. But when you get to something like a personality disorder or something like schizophrenia spectrum, those are not things that everyone can just generally understand. And so those labels can be very stigmatizing. Um, Personality disorders is something that I've studied for a long time. I've worked with people that have a variety of different personality disorders, so I kind of like to talk about that. And I like to talk about how personality is formed, not how it develops during childhood, but as an adult, what it looks like and what are the components of it and how you can measure those different components. So really interesting. If you want to learn a lot more about this, take Abnormal Psych. It's Psych 3013. Take it if you can, take it on ground because we talk a lot about a lot of stuff in on ground, more so than we can do online. But that would be a great course for you to take. I'll talk to you later.